welcome everybody. Appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of your Friday to join us. Hopefully this won't be too painful for you, but I think this is an interesting topic. Shaun asked me to do this, I don't know what, maybe like a month ago, as we're looking at, with the ARA, looking at the awards and what does that mean and all of that. So yep, Andrew Minnelli here. I'm with GSI Executive Search. I'm the Rackets consultant and executive search consultant for the firm. Bit of a unique position because I also manage a club here in the desert in California, Bighorn Golf Club. We are open 8 months out of the year. So we're just starting to prepare for the upcoming season. Our members don't start showing up until mid-October to early November, and then we go strong until May. And both gigs are a lot of fun. They work simultaneously, well together, and it's kind of nice for me because I've got balance with family, with all of that. So that's a little bit about me. And I think what I'd like to do, maybe we can just unmute everybody and just have everybody just introduce themselves. And you don't need to tell us your favorite color and your food and all of that, but just, who you are, where are you from, and, what your role is in the industry. Why don't we start with you, Shaun?
What is my role in the industry? I love that question. I am a recovering tennis professional and absolutely love being off the court and helping in other ways. Starting the American Racket Sports Association, which was born out of the GPTA here in Georgia. We are helping the industry as best we can with professional networking, career services, and jobs platforms, and everything we can possibly do in that realm to where I don't have to balance managing a club, which is fantastic. I can do this full time, and working from home also with the family balance works out well. So hopefully the 3-year-old doesn't pop his head in here and interrupt us. But I get to have the best. Yeah, exactly. I get to have the best of all those worlds. So I am happy to be part of doing things like this and looking forward to doing more of it.
Kerry?
My name is Kerry Buck. I am currently the director of racket sports at the Griffin Club in Los Angeles. And I've known Andrew for years, so he invited me to join this call, and I'm really glad I did. I'm also still trying to figure out what that word balance means, because running both the tennis and the pickleball programs at a really busy club is great. I love what I do. I love to be on court still. I've been in tennis my whole life. I've worked with the USTA as a director of marketing. I've been on national board with USPTA. I've worked Tennis Channel for 9 years. So tennis is in my blood, and I'm just glad to be on here and have a chance to chat with all of you.
Thanks for joining. Stuart?
Yeah, Stuart Russell, partner with Universal Tennis Management, managing several different tennis centers from HOAs to semi-private clubs to private clubs and municipalities in the Atlanta area. And waning down in the latter part of my career and taking more of a managerial role as opposed to the traditional tennis professional role, as being on court, but overseeing and mentoring what would be that next generation of people that are looking to make this a career rather than a job.
Love that.
That is great.
Russell, you want to share what your next venture is going to be once you wind this down?
Oh, did you ask me?
Yeah. Last time you shared something I'm very interested in. Your life's passion you're going to pursue after your tennis pro career is over.
Oh yeah, well I'm actually for 22 years I was actually very involved in youth sports, and mainly my son and my daughter's. My daughter was a soccer player, a collegiate soccer player, and my son was a baseball player. And I want to give back to all of the crud that I gave all the umpires, and I want to actually be an umpire.
Oh, nice.
I was thinking of actually becoming. I got an offer to be actually a coach at the Perfect Game Complex, which is a large complex in this area, of a 15U team. And instead of coaching, I'd rather umpire. So if and when I retire, I mean, going to be 60 in a couple of weeks, heading to the Ryder Cup for a bucket list item to watch the Ryder Cup. And I'm thinking 62 I have as a target date to where I'm going to be umpiring baseball.
Awesome.
Wow. Scott?
Yeah, thank you. Scott McNat with GSI Executive Search. I've been with the firm now 17 years. Have a tennis background prior to that, and I'm here to support Andrew and the relationship that we now have with the Racket Sports Association. And also, kind of checking up here on Andrew and how he's doing.
I appreciate that.
I met Andrew years ago when he was a pro at the Seattle Tennis Club, and then later we brought him in. So good to be here.
Yeah, and Scott won't tell you this, but he's also been owner of clubs, so he's not just a consultant. He's deep into the business. He gets all the angles of running it on a day-to-day basis. And he's our senior leader within the firm. So he's got years of experience in reading people and getting the right hire in the right spot.
Thank you, Andrew. You'll get
Dan, I haven't seen you in a while. How are you?
Same here, man. So we've exchanged emails and texts, but it's good to see your face once again. Yeah, Ben Hatsley, very similar to everyone on the call. I'm trying to find that balance, and I create a company to try to do that. I still get to coach and do what I love, run after school programs for kids, but then also have two young ones as well that I'm trying to navigate through the youth sports pathway. And so it gives me some being away from the club. I should say that first for those of you who don't know what I did before. I was at a private country club as the director there for 14 years. And then during COVID, segued out of that to have more family time. But then, like I said, also allow me to, excuse me, to coach some. And then through that, through my son's baseball journey, I, similar to Stuart, started coaching baseball as well. So now I kind of have a 50-50 split almost between the tennis and the baseball in terms of coaching.
Are there awards for dad baseball coaching?
There are awards.
Yeah,
There's an association called the ABCA. It's very similar. They don't necessarily do certification. It's more of a continuing education thing, but it's very similar to the American Racket Sports Association.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, again, thanks for everybody for joining. Reiterating the topic, do awards matter? I call them very expensive paperweights, that you hope your board of directors or your GM notices on your desk. And we'll get into it. I look at awards, as beneficial, but we can categorize this. There's different types of awards and recognitions in our industry. You've got your national awards, you've got your regional awards. There's club-specific awards, whether it's your employee of the month or year, service awards, that type of thing. Another type of award, but it's not something you can hang on your wall. Recognition within the industry is, being able to speak, at conventions, put together publications, being part of panels. I think that's a way to get your name out there and be visible and have that silent nod, within the industry. And I think within those three categories, and do they matter? Personally, yeah, I think they matter, but they also don't at the same time. Where awards matter, I think, they carry broad, industry recognition for sure. I think from an inside perspective, this is kind of interesting, where if you're part of an association, whether it's American Racket Sports, RSPA, USPTA, PTR, does that award matter? Are you even able to get in there? Does it feel like there's gatekeepers trying to, keep you out? Or are they just giving each other awards, on the board? And in that case, kind of going back to what I said earlier, if you do feel that way, there is still a way to feel recognized and have that award, that you're not necessarily hanging on the wall. It's being part of panels and publications and all of that. Let's see what else in my notes here. The other thing that I think is important to note, because Scott and I are in this business, in terms of placing people, within facilities. How does the outside world look at awards, and does that matter to them? We can really dig into that. And I do want this to be more interactive, so we'll probably unmute people fairly shortly on this. But I think my take on that, if you get a Pro of the Year award or an Industry Excellence Award, again, those are all fantastic. It gives you recognition within the industry and within our community. But I think if a search committee is looking at you, that could be a differentiating maker for you. If you get off that short list, and hopefully on a list where you might want to be, or they want to interview you. So I definitely think it's important, that way. But also, it's the outside world might not necessarily know what some of this stuff means, because there's a bunch of acronyms out there, and there's meaning to it for us. And so I think one important thing to look at is, if you are, honored with an award and blessed with it, just make certain that your resume just doesn't list it. And maybe this is just more of my trained professional eye, but if I look at a resume and I see that you've got a bunch of awards on there, good for you. But does your resume and where you've been flush that out? Does it actually show me that you've really done a lot to win that award? Because then we start getting into, okay, were you potentially self-nominated? How many people were actually in there? I don't think a search committee is going to catch on that one, but I might. And Scott might, being in the industry that way, and knowing the intricacies. So I'm just curious, based on that, and maybe we can just unmute everybody. What do you think about awards and in our industry, and based on, is there one that really helped you get a position, or or got you seen by somebody that you really want to be hired and you ended up getting that job? Don't all speak at once. I mean, I can pick on Kerry for a little bit, because I've known her for a while and we've served on boards together. You've got countless awards, and you're unique. I've always called you the Swiss Army knife. I'll give you that as well, because you've done everything, and you can do everything. And you've won a lot of awards. How has that helped you as you've navigated your career and gone from Tennis Channel to club and PBI and all of that?
I think that I think awards are great, and they're great for different reasons. I think that winning any kind of an award or any recognition just can totally boost somebody's confidence level, make them really feel appreciated all of a sudden, and turn their, maybe turn around their viewpoint on what they're doing, and maybe really give them the boost that they need to keep going. Like, hey, I just got recognized for this. Now I'm really excited about it, and I'm going to work super hard to just get to the next level, right? Other people are going to get their award and go, okay, I got my award, I'm done now. Those are the ones that drive me crazy. I think also some of the awards that I've gotten, where you start at your district level, your division level, and you win that award. And then you go on to a regional and you're now winning that one. And then you go on to a national and you're winning that one. I think those are the ones that I think have huge impact, not just to the person winning them, but also to the outside world, because they see the progression. Like, we've talked before when we were on the board here in Southern Cal, that you mentioned self-nominations already, or two or three people nominate their best buddy or whatever. And that's great. They're not going to get them if they're not deserving, but to take that and then go to the next level, where it's not all your friends and your direct colleagues voting on that award to win that one, and then go to a national level where there's a national committee voting on it. Those are the ones that I think really, really count and really have legs. Yeah, there's a lot. I'm trying to think like, I mean, I've won Pro of the Year twice for Southern California. Like winning it once was fantastic. Winning it twice really made me feel like, okay, I am really doing what I need to be doing, right? I'm doing something right here if I'm getting recognized a second time. And I think it's okay for organizations to give out an award to somebody more than once. A lot of places don't like to do that. They're like, oh, we got it 2 years ago. Let's not give it to them. But if somebody's really deserving, I think we need to overlook that and give them the recognition that they need. I also agree with you when you were mentioning like speaking. Somebody that might not have ever won an award, but is speaking on a monthly basis at a tennis conference or a pickleball conference or whatever it might be, that in itself, I think, means a lot more to the public and to everybody's colleagues than, a certificate on your wall or a trophy on your shelf, because you're out there affecting so many more people all the time and not just your little group that you've got. So I think that that's important to consider as well, is just, the recognition that you get either as a great speaker or as a director or a rookie pro or whatever it is. It's just, I think awards are also a lot about commitment. And when you're winning them, that shows that you're committed to doing a good job at something. Does that make any sense?
No, no, it absolutely does. And thanks for that, especially on the progression part of it. Because when I look at resumes and I go to pitch a candidate to a club, there has to be logical progression within the
Mhm.
career. And I think that also completely correlates with the awards that are won. And it's not wrong. You're not going to be, I don't think it's that you won't be seen by a club if you don't have awards. It definitely gives you the boost for sure. But that's a good point that if you won something regionally and then all of a sudden you're seen more on that national stage, yeah, you've made it. And that's definitely something, you should be proud of for sure. The other thing I would mention too, and it's maybe more of a reality check as well. It's nice to have these things, but I don't think there's a silver bullet and like, oh, I won Pro of the Year
Right.
and I think I'm going to get this job. Just in general, a lot of times too, and just this might be a different part of the conversation we can bring in, but when country clubs or search committees are looking at you. Okay, that's great. You have that award, but they also might be focused on what's their culture, what are they trying to fix, and you might have a list of awards on there, but does that really mesh with where they're going? And it does have to work both ways. I think a lot of the awards are again they're great, and it's an honor to win them, but I don't think that necessarily nets you the job, and I do want to make sure that I'm clear on that too. You got to show up day in and day out and do the work. And a lot of times too, it's more of, did you do the work even when somebody's not looking? Because if you build that program, if you build your brand, you're seen. And I think that is more important than an award at the end of the day. Now, I don't know if anybody has any comments on that.
Well, I have a question, if you don't mind, Andrew,
Yeah.
before we go on to the next example on that. It's related to that. Have you seen a resume at a higher level with zero awards? So is I'm not saying there's causality there, but is there a connection? Because if someone comes in for a director of tennis position, do those resumes potentially have zero awards, or is there always something in that section?
I think there's always something in that section, especially for somebody who's, let's call them a veteran in the industry. If you've made impact where you are or within your community, I think at some point that definitely does go recognized. So that does go in there. I mean, I've seen a plethora of things in different variations where it's heavy with awards. And then, that there's a light bulb that goes off and go, wow, maybe again, a search committee might not look into this, but how many of those really were self-nominated? And again, what is really behind that? I'm sure you earned it, congratulations, but what did you do actually to, again, I referenced this before, what did you do at your job or within the community, on that board? What did you do to actually deserve it? Because if I'm not seeing all of that stuff on your resume, I just the question mark is there. But again, just going back to your question, most veterans have an awareness where they've got good balance on the resume where they list them, but I can also tell, kind of to Gary's point, yes, there's logical progression. Boy, they really boosted revenue there. Look what they did with their events. That's innovative, and they created the culture, within their staff where retention was important, and that was something that's in there. So them as a leader, that's why they deserve to win that award. So some of that stuff definitely shows up. Again, does that net you a job? No, not necessarily, but I do see awards in there, whether it's a long list or just a small list. I don't think I've ever seen zero, not with a veteran.
I think if I can jump in real quick, I think
Please.
another thing to look at is what kind of award is it? Like we've talked about, like Pro of the Year, right? You know, USPTA used to give out like small club and large club awards and things like that. Working with USTA when I did, we gave a lot of service awards. And I think service awards are kind of in a category by themselves because to me, people that are winning service awards are kind of going above and beyond what they're normally doing, right? They might be doing a great job at what they're doing, but they're also giving back. And Andrew, I mean, I was born and raised to give back. You always have to give back, right? Whether it was like, donating some of your candy to someplace or whatever on Halloween, which I never really wanted to do, but my mom and dad made me. Um, but, like wheelchair tennis or you're, getting a service award from a foundation that you help with or something like that. And I think that goes a lot to tell about somebody's character when they're getting awards like that. And I think that, I mean, when I look at resumes for new pros, I'm always looking for stuff like that. What are they doing besides just teaching on court? Do they have other things that they're doing, that really complete the person and tell you a little bit more about their character? So I think those are important to look at as well.
Yeah, I'll move on to another point here as well. We've talked about, where awards matter and, here's a concept. Is there ever an opportunity where you think maybe an award that's on your resume or something could that backfire on you somehow?
Hmm.
I thought about that a little bit before, I began preparing for this and I've been through this, every once in a while as well. When I was in transition and before I joined GSI, we came down here to the desert from Seattle and, I was looking for jobs and in a lot of ways, I was looking at positions and I listed some of those awards maybe on my resume, but it maybe really looked overqualified.
Hmm.
And I think that's something to consider. I mean, do you take that off your resume? I don't know. That's debatable. But I struggled a little bit, trying to find that position here within the desert. And I at one point I frankly just gave up. I was like, look, I want to try to affect impact and change more on a broader level. And that's when Scott and I had that conversation. Um, lucky to be part of that. But getting into awards again, did I feel overqualified in a few areas? And, I think I did. And maybe I was somewhat intimidating. And so I think too,
Right.
when you're also, and again, do awards matter? Can it backfire? I think when you're looking at positions, do be mindful of, if you're applying for a specific job, look at your resume to make sure that it makes sense with what they're looking for, because
Mhm.
if it's a job where it's like, look, like maybe I might seen as like I'm too good for this, for lack of better words. Should I really have that on there? Or is my message that I want to get across, it's not about the awards, it's not about the compensation, it's not about any of that. I just want to be within a community and make a difference, and that's the way I felt when I was doing some of the job hunting before I joined GSI. And I felt like some of those kind of backfired on me a little bit. And I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that as well.
I can attest to that. Not I don't think from personal experience, but of me personally, big backfiring on me. But I've been through a couple of transitions. When I was at Druid Hills, I was at several transitions of general managers. I actually had the luxury of it was really fun to serve on the search committee. I was the staff person on the search committee for our general manager. So I actually got to hire my boss basically, which was a super fun experience.
Hmm.
And I've been through a transition at a club where the tennis director left, and we were hiring a new director. And I always joke with Shaun all the time, and I say like, whenever a director leaves or GM leaves, like the members like they want what the last guy or girl didn't do, right? It's always like, what do they not do? And we want to find somebody that does that, right? And so to your point, Andrew, like, let's say that the previous director did give it back a lot, like Kerry said, and that's a great thing. And he or she was like, they were on all these boards, they were on USPTA and USTA, and they were on their speakers bureau, right? They're speaking, and then, so in the hiring process for the next guy comes, it's like, well, we want somebody who's going to be here for the club. We want somebody who's going to
Right.
be here for devoted to the members, devoted to developing and managing the staff. Like, not there. Yeah, it's great. You got your insert name country club. I didn't want to say the name of the club. Insert name country club on your shirt, but you're just promoting kind of yourself, and you're out there. Yeah, you're giving back, and that's great. You're promoting your industry, but you're not really giving a lot of time to the club. And we want somebody who's going to be devoted to being here all the time, basically.
Yeah,
So
I was
that
gonna
person's
say,
fault, but that the last guy was like that. But I've seen it happen.
Yeah. Go ahead, Scott.
I was gonna say the same thing. It can be overdone if you've got a resume that's 1 page of experience and 3 pages of awards.
Yeah.
It's, are you dedicated to building your resume, or are you going to work for the club?
Right.
And that,
Yeah, I can speak on that too. Yeah,
Yeah.
we just went through something similar to this because we manage as opposed to, and we were courted by a country club. So one of the awards that I won a while back was called the Southern Mentor Award, and I mentored a pro that actually we found that it was the right time for him to move on. He was kind of stuck at the club we were at, and I actually recommended he take a country club job as a director. He did get the job, and I held it near and dear to my heart that when he now is moving on, he recommended me, and I had to go into the meeting with the committee and explain to them, you're not getting me, you're getting our group. And because we're a management group.
Right.
Now it's a team effect. And like what Ben was saying, a lot of the people are just like, we want you at our disposal, 24/7. And is the idea of that you got to be very transparent when you sit in a meeting, and you just got to make sure you don't overpromise things that you're not interested in doing for a country club. So the idea is, yeah, could I go back at that other chapter and be a tennis director at a country club? Sure, I could, but our company has moved on and it's different than that. And you got to just tell the story. My point is, when you're sitting in the committee room, right, it could backfire if they see that I was a country club director for X amount of years. But me having the conversation and being completely transparent with them, I'm not interested in continuing to do that. So you got to find the right fit for what you're trying to, the right fit. You don't want to, what is it? Under promise and over deliver. Yep. But you got to make sure that what you're trying to do is in a country club is you can walk out of there and feel like, wait a minute, I at least told what we planned on doing. Okay. Whether we're the right fit or not is for them to figure out. If they want just a one-person operation to be at their disposal, then we're not going to be the right candidates for this country club, because that's not what they get. My staff now, in trying to tell a story, because we really do want this facility, what we do is we tell them the story. It's like, hey, listen, I'm sure your tennis committee doesn't want to have to go through this every 2 or 3 years.
Exactly.
That's our job to figure out. Right. Our job is to fill in the holes with the right people, so you guys don't have to worry about it. If we're not the right candidates, then we shake hands. If we don't pit, another person versus saying they're the wrong fit. We just say, hey, it just didn't work out. It was an opportunity that's just not going to work out. And you got to feel comfortable enough to know that in what you're doing. When you have those conversations, you got to be completely transparent when you're walking into a meeting.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And kind of piggybacking off what Scott had said earlier too, getting back to, resumes and awards on that. I think an overemphasis of awards, that can also signal ego. And, self-promotion, I see that a lot on LinkedIn where, oh, I won this award and I'm humbled by that. And I'm sure that you are. And again, I don't want to minimize that at all. A lot of these things are definitely well deserved. But if you have so much of it on there, it's more about you and versus overshadowing the team's contributions. And I think, as a leader and you getting some of these awards, when a club's looking at you, it's more about, how do you engage your team? How do you create culture? We talked about, or I talked about retention earlier, and so I think those are more important than just, signaling, oh, this is who I am and you need to hire me because, I'm pro of the year. I don't want to dig in too much of how it could backfire, but it's an interesting concept, and I think there's probably more good than winning the award than negatives, obviously. But this is a fun one to kind of dig into.
I think too, like I worked at a club once, and I won't say where it was, but our director of tennis like routinely got manager of the quarter. And it was a very large resort in Hawaii. Routinely got manager of the quarter. And as the pros, the pro shop staff, everybody he managed, we routinely never saw him because he was always on the golf course. But he always managed to get manager of the quarter. And we were like, he's not even doing anything. But what he did, and what proved a big point to me, is that he surrounded himself and he built a team with the right people. So he didn't have to be around, right? So I think what that says is that, a lot of these awards, it's like, yes, it's one person that's winning it, but it's the team that helped them get it. And I think that that's really important is like, to me, a leadership award, something like that is going to hold more clout than, I don't know, something else, right? Because that means you're really building those teams. But I think it's also super important that when people, this is kind of off the topic on a resume, but when people do win those awards, that they remember who helped them get there, because this guy literally was never there. We'd see him once a week, unless we were on the golf course with him, which did happen sometimes. But I think that that's really important too, is that these people aren't generally winning these awards by themselves, right? They've got a strong team that's helping them and helping make them look good and make them stand out. And that comes because this person has created a culture of excellence. So I think that's important to sort of throw in there too.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
that reminds me of the similar to you, Kerry. One of the most fun and exciting times at Druid Hills was when our tennis maintenance guy, the head of tennis maintenance, won Employee of the Year
Hmm.
at essentially a golf club, and it was just the camaraderie with the membership, for the next probably next year. Honestly, I mean, it just was really really cool. My question, Andrew, is talk about number of awards, length of awards, how many awards you put out. What about time? Like, how far back would
Yeah,
one
how far back do
you
you go?
guys expect to see? I've seen some resumes where we were in 2025 and it says I was the 2002, male player of the year. Like, okay, well, if you played since, I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's maybe Scott and I have different opinions because I love to hear from you after I say this, but I think time, I'd put it all on there, and I think long ago are the days of just having one resume. I just think it needs to kind of
Hmm.
just make sense, right? There has to be that logical progression, and if you won an award earlier in your career, boy, I'm really dating myself. I started at Smith Stearns and Hilton Head back in 2002 or 2001, which is when I graduated college. And I didn't win an award then because, you're earning your stripes. But let's just say that I did. I don't think there's anything wrong to put that on there because again, it just shows that, I was showing up, I was recognized for what I did. Is it relevant to maybe a position that I'm going for now? No, maybe not. I mean, if it doesn't make sense on your resume as you're telling your story, you can probably take it off. But I don't, I think if you're presenting yourself and your brand and all of that, I don't think that there's anything wrong with having it on there as long as your story makes sense.
Yeah, if your story makes sense and it's relatable to the progression of what you're trying to do, starting as an assistant pro, working yourself to an associate pro. If this is the timeline, and it just shows the longevity, that you've shown in the progression in our business. I think, people will actually appreciate that, because if you started as an assistant pro and you were the grunt worker, but you worked yourself through all the different variables in the business, I think it's a logical thing for people to see that and say, wow, this person's kind of a lifer. They really did see this as a career as opposed to a job, a daily job. And I think as long as you tell the story, I don't think a timeline on when you did something 20 years ago, there could be a logical progression that somebody's going to say, wow, this person's, you know what I'm saying? I appreciate the longevity and the way they went about this progression. I think it's an interesting one.
The one thing I would say though, if again, Carrie, I'll pick on you because
Yeah, great,
you
thanks.
are an award winner. But with a list of like yours, maybe as you're telling your story, I would think about what awards have you won, and let's just say you are active in the market and you're looking at jobs, or somebody came to you and you want to tell that story. You might want to look through there and go, all right, is that really relevant? To them, are they going to see that? Does that help me with my
Right.
story? Does that help me with my brand? Or, great that I want it. Maybe I should just take that off. Is it really irrelevant at the end of the day?
I have actually taken a lot of them off,
Mm-hmm.
depending on what it is. It's like you said, we always have more than one resume. And I will put in there, awards and accolades or whatever, including, and then I will list some of those ones. I mean, the one that meant the most to me is probably not one that means the most to somebody that's hiring me. And that was when my family won the USTA National Family of the Year. And that was one of the ones that we progressed from Southern California to California State to the Western region to, all that type of stuff. But to somebody that's, to me, it meant a lot because how many families are there that work so closely together and are so involved in one thing, all the same thing all the time? And you can't win Family of the Year without your family, right? So that was the one that's always stuck out to me in my career. But I think to somebody that might be hiring me, that's just like, oh yeah, they play tennis together. It doesn't mean as much. So I do definitely tailor things depending on what I'm looking for. I also don't want it to look like I'm spread too thin. Like, you're out there winning all these awards. How are you going to even have the time to take care of the club that we want you to work at? So I definitely think there's I don't want to say an art to it, but if you've got too much stuff listed, it just, do they need to know that you're on an ad staff for a racket company for the last 40 years and you're listing all the timelines? Or do they just need to know that you're on it? Things like that. You can always elaborate more once you get that, put enough stuff on there so you get the interview, right? But you can elaborate on those things once you're there and explain and give them more context. So I do think that it's fine to take certain things off. And it might be that you take off something recent, but you leave something from a long time ago because that was more what is going to be in line with what they're looking for.
And that's a good point. One other thing I want to mention too, let's just say you're not in the job market and you get that award. Does that bring street credit to what you do, and is your membership appreciative of that? Personally, I would say yes, but at the end of the day, I mean, I'll give a really good example. Seattle Tennis Club held a very special place in my heart. But I don't think they really cared at the end of the day what our team won or what I won. It was about their experience, so chasing those awards, is that going to help them bring in new members? That's a unique club where they're landlocked, and they can't bring in more members, a flood of them, because they don't have enough courts,
Space.
to support the utilization that they currently have. So do awards matter there? No. Is it a good boost? Sure. And I think there's some other clubs where, again, there's not one right answer on that one, but there's other clubs like, look, like Ben did a fantastic job. He's pro of the year. I mean, look at what he did for the program. We are so proud of that. And let's elevate him, within the community, and congrats. Let's pat him on the back.
Hey, Andrew,
Yep.
I was going to add, in terms of the question of how far back do you go, I think if you were a highly ranked junior player or you were a strong college player, I think it's good to put that on there, even though the job may not, require a great playing director. I think those things are really interesting to know about a candidate if you've had that kind of success.
I absolutely agree. And also thanks for saying that. I think it's a good point, and I completely missed that one. So my apologies. Rankings, were you a nationally ranked player? Did you do something well in the NCAAs, or did you win that tournament that everybody knows about? Does being a good player net you a job? Not always, but it definitely helps. It can help. I think most clubs would want to know if you can beat their best player, or at least, hang with them or her. And if you can't, it doesn't mean you don't get the position. But if you have that on your resume where, hey, you were all American or all honors in your conference in high school, and that was a really tough division, I don't think there's anything wrong with putting that on there. Thanks for saying that.
Well, Andrew, we have a struggle, if you don't mind. We have a struggle here in Atlanta where we've got quite a few pros that think it matters more than anything else. So they will have a bulk of a resume on how great of a player they are. And eventually we just start rolling our eyes and say, okay, get it. Just say Division I and let's move on. Or
Yeah, I totally agree. It can really be a turnoff if it's the main thing you're selling.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I agree with that.
I've seen this too, where it's kind of like the silent joke in the industry, where you might see a club that has that that storied person, and did very well, in competitive days, whether it was on tour or collegiately or in the satellite circuit. I mean, whatever it might be. And the kind of knock on that as well, can they manage? And it's a total stereotype, not always, is it the point where they can't, but a lot of them can't. And so if you have a lot of that stuff on there, we talked about this earlier, is it about ego? Are you checking that box, or is it more about, the team and what you've built? If you were number one in the country, or again, we're just throwing stuff out there. In college, is that about you or your team? So that's, I think it's important to have that stuff on there as well.
Well, hopefully, Andrew, clubs have learned that over the years. I know in my year, I mean, I'm not gonna name drop, but I did beat out some formerly famous people for a director's job. Luckily, because the search committee did not do what you're talking about. They thought, hey, this named person that was former top 50 in the world. Yeah, but can the person really manage? Is he really going to bring us more membership? Is he really going to bring us more program? What does this person know about coaching a 3-0 Alta lady?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So it's, and so I was lucky that the committee was somebody who, knew a little bit about that. But we've seen that traditionally. I think about that movie Wimbledon, if you remember, and the guy's on tour as like his last run on tour, and there's a scene where he's getting interviewed by the local club in England, and they're like, hey, as soon as you retire, we'll bring in number 4 in the world, blah blah blah, whatever his name was. And I think traditionally, you look over time, like whatever 30, 40 years ago, that was a thing, you know. And those guys, fortunately or unfortunately for some of us, got fired because they weren't good managers, and as clubs became more dynamic. So, I'm sure you and Scott have a ton of experience with seeing that sort of story unfold.
Yeah, and it can also work as well, because I think, somebody that has really excelled in what they do, if they're able to translate that into, building a program or, rallying a team, I think those are skills, are totally translatable. It's just a matter of, are they able to do it? And yeah, it's a stereotype, and not everybody's like that. I placed somebody last year, who was a storied pro, and he's doing a fantastic job. So it can work both ways. I know we could probably talk forever on this stuff, and we're probably running out of time. Again, I really appreciate everybody being on here. Are there any, we'll probably just open this up. Are there any other questions or any comments, from anybody? I see Shaun raising his hand there, or maybe that's somebody else in the room.
No, before I would do that, I know we mentioned self-nomination a few times, but I'd love to have some actual opinions on it because in the smaller areas, and in Georgia, we've seen this specifically with some of the smaller organizations. We dealt with it previously, the ARA as the GPTA, where you just needed somebody to get nominated.
Mhm.
And we had to open it up from a self nomination standpoint. And I'm curious as to thoughts on self nomination, when it makes sense and when it doesn't.
I'll jump in.
Please.
I think self-nominations are fine. I think that it's great if you've got somebody that's wants to recognize you. I mean, I think that's better. But I think sometimes, like you said, smaller areas, maybe areas where it's sort of the old boys network nominating people all the time. I think it's good to advocate for yourself. I think if you really think you've earned this and you've done a good job, maybe you're at a small club and nobody even knows what you've been doing at that club, but you've just turned around the culture and turned around the members and it's just blossoming because of what you've done. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I do know that a lot of people look down on that. In fact, there's a lot of these award forms that come out that say like, is this a self-nomination? Like, oh, we're not going to count it as much if it's a self-nomination, right? But I think you've got to go with who this person is and what they've done, and if they've done it, does it really matter that they're self-nominating? Maybe they're, you know, embellishing a little bit, who knows? But I don't think it's a bad thing to do if you're in a situation where you may not otherwise get recognized. I mean, I think
Yeah.
if you've got people to do it and help you along with it and, make a call and say, hey, I really want to do this. I really want this award. I think I've earned it. And can you help me and recommend me or nominate me? That's great. But not everybody has that opportunity. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think there should be this big stigma attached to it. I think once a nominating committee looks at everybody and compares everybody, they're going to find the right person, whether it was self-nominated or not.
I do agree with that. I think there's nothing wrong with it. And also, for Scott and I, we're in the search world. Is a club really going to know that you were self-nominated? Probably not. That might be more of an insider thing, or within that association that, gosh, we were really low on numbers, and but we're giving it to Stuart because he really earned that. And that's okay. And that was self-nominated, not to pick on you, Stuart, but
No, no.
but yeah, I know I totally think that's fine. Any other questions?
If not, I got one more.
Okay, go for it. Love it.
Just how I'm like, oh, writing them down. Okay, I'll save them all to the end. Public speaking more important than awards, I heard mentioned. I don't remember who it was, but and maybe potentially should have been thrown in there. Public speaking meaning getting the chance to either moderate on a panel at a Racket X, which I'm excited I get to do coming up in Atlanta, and that's a lot of fun. And it isn't like the self-nomination that we have, which is my podcast, which means I get to talk whenever I want. That's not the same thing as public speaking. When someone else calls you up and says, hey, Ben, I need your expertise. Will you come speak to our audience? In that case, I hadn't thought about it in that way of importance of priority, but being asked to speak is a better thing than getting an award, or are they different enough to be incomparable?
I don't know if it's better, and I'm not sure about the comment earlier. Maybe I said that, and I retract that. Get that out of the notes. But it is a solid award to be asked to do that stuff, because you are seen as an expert in what you do, or maybe you have a different perspective that I think should be out there in the open, where maybe people can learn from you. I mean, there's no point in reinventing the wheel. And so, in a way, is that really an award you hang on the wall? No. But, good for you, Shaun, for being a moderator on that, because you have that personality to be able to foster conversation and bring everybody together, but within a 45-minute segment of time, have everybody, voice their perspective and do it in a way where, the audience gets something out of that. So I think that's really cool. And
Yeah,
Kerry, you just hosted Racket X
yeah, we did, and I got to be
that
the
was fun.
host with the hostess with the mostest. It was a blast. It was really fun. I agree that being asked to speak at conferences and things like that, I did 2 this spring with PTR, and it was great. And it definitely is a different thing than, putting that trophy on the shelf. I don't know that one's more important than the other. I think that they go kind of hand in hand, but I think in terms of, I mean, Shaun, you mentioned expertise, right? It's like when somebody knows that you have the expertise to speak about something, that's what, I mean, if you can teach it, you've got the expertise on it, right? And you can speak to it. And so I think that that is equally important. I don't know if it's more important. I think it just depends on, some people want a physical trophy. It doesn't matter that much to me. I just want to be able to, do what I do and get the opportunity. If I get the opportunity to speak, I always jump at it, because I think, and I think it says a lot about the fact that maybe it's not even necessarily in your area. Maybe it's you traveling cross country to speak to a group of people that you don't even know, right? You're all tennis people or rackets people or whatever, but you've been asked because you've got that expertise in that area. And I think that that counts for a lot. Um, Again, I wouldn't overdo it like I've spoken at, 16 conferences and you're listing them all. Just that you've spoken at conferences, national conferences, that's a big deal. And there's not really an award that goes with that, right? Might be an industry excellence thing, but it doesn't really tell you that you're an expert speaker. But yeah, we just hosted the Racket X City Series here in LA at the club, and it was fantastic. And I can tell you, I mean, Andrew, you and I have talked about this, that it made a difference. It was the first time I think my GM really saw me in my element of being at a tennis conference, and I think it had some impact on how he views what I can bring to the club. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it was a blast, and we had all these people. I mean, at one point he asked me, he's like, "Do you know everybody here?" I'm like, "Not yet, but I will by the end of it," right? Um, so it was great. It was great for the club. The members were super impressed that we even had it here. So, things like that do matter. And can really give you a boost with different things with your management or with your members or whatever. So I think that the speaking thing is just as important as the, man on a stick that you get to bring home.
Very well said. Very well said. Are there any other questions? No?
Andrew, I'll leave it up to you. I got 2:29. We can completely shut it down in 1 minute if you want, or if we wanted to ask some more questions. I know Rafa showed up a little bit here, and so he's missed a lot of it. Welcome, Rafa. I appreciate you making the time. And so he probably doesn't know what questions to ask. I know we skipped over the when they help and when they don't. There was a little bit of that, of maybe that was more focused on when to drop off and say, I won this award in 2002, but I agree that putting what you've accomplished and what you've been recognized for on a resume makes sense. But the simple answer there that's pretty much been clear here is have the resume for the job you want. And if you got 30 awards and you only need 9, that's okay. I think that's a good problem to have. For me, I've won 1 award. I'm done. That's it. That's all I need. I got my award. That's it. I can just stick it on there and say, I won an award. I don't have 0. So clearly Andrew's never seen a resume without, with only 0 awards on it. Yeah. So Andrew, if you want to open it up, one more question. Anybody else?
I think we did talk about, where they help a little bit, but, let me address that too, just in case, maybe there was some confusion, or again, maybe I just didn't, but I think if there's a search committee looking at people, do awards matter there? Absolutely. I think it can differentiate you between, you and other candidates and help get you on that short list. Does that help you get the job necessarily? No, but I think that helps you get the conversation. I think when you get an award, I think it validates reputation. And in a very competitive market, I know Atlanta's I have a lot of respect for that market because you really, there's a ton of Alta teams. People take lessons. You have to know what you're doing. You have to know what you're talking about. And if you win an award there, that just validates your reputation, and that makes sense there. And where it also can help, I think it can, and we talked about this, I think it can add prestige to your club or your program. It does give you that nod of, hey, your team, you've really worked hard on this. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And again, just probably repetitive, where it can backfire. You don't want to list too much and then not have any substance in the other areas. And because that will make it feel like it's more inflated. And, there could be some question marks there and go, well, is it more about him or her? And are they going to show up at my club on a daily basis or my facility and do the job that we really need them to do for the community? So I think, overemphasizing those sometimes, it could backfire. But, I think just in general, just wrapping it all up, getting an award is a total honor. It's very helpful. If you're able to win one or self-nominate, go for it. Because we do a lot of things in the industry. Sometimes they go unnoticed, and as Kerry said earlier, it can be a very good confidence booster.